I'm from Sweden, of course, as you have guessed, and I have written and researched this subject for the past 7 years, maybe. So yeah, I will talk about this about the Uthark theory that was created by a Swedish scholar named Sigurd Agrell, and he lived at the turn of the century, over 100 years ago. And yeah, the Uthark theory is a bit debated, but despite what you may have heard about it before, it is a theory developed by one single individual. Although the connections he makes with the different systems from around the world has been done by people before him and after him. So a lot of things in his theory is more or less accepted. A lot of things in his theories are speculations and not so accepted today in the academia. Yeah, I will start by telling you a bit about Sigurd Agrell, very briefly, who he is, and then talk about some of the basic concepts related to this theory. They mainly come from different traditions and spiritual magical traditions across the globe. I will go into them a little bit more in detail. And then I will end by going into talking a little bit about one of the runes in particular, which is the first rune, which is very important for this theory. Yeah, I also have a few images to send around. I guess once you get the picture, just pass it on to the next person, and we make sure that everybody sees it. It's around 5-6 images, nothing strange. So, Sigurd Agrell, the inventor of the Uthark theory, he was a professor in linguistics at a very prominent, at the time, university in Sweden, at the south of Sweden. He studied Russian, Sanskrit, and he was also into Esperanto. He translated some of the big Russian authors to Swedish, like Tolstoy and Pushkin. So he was very important for the literary scene in Sweden at the time. He was also a published poet, and he formed a group together with 4 or 3 other poets at the university, and they formed a group called the Devil's Quartet. They were symbolists, of course, considering the time, inspired by Rimbaud, Verlaine, but Agrell himself was also very much into Schopenhauer, and he has been described as a pessimist also. His poetry often dealt with people and gods and deities from Antiquity, and you can really see his interest in for the mysterious and the esoteric taking shape early on in his career when he was already a poet. Yeah, we have the first picture here. Picture of the man himself with a small translation of a snippet from a poem here. I'll start with you then. And this was, I think, a pretty early picture of him around his when he was a student. So when he achieved his professor title in 1921, he stopped producing any more works related to linguistics, and then he started to dive into what seemed to be his real passion, which was the runes and the world of myth and magic. So I will. This is just a very brief introduction to the person, and I will just end this with a quote that captures the relationship between the rune researcher and the symbolist, so that you know a little bit more where he's coming from, and so that you get a little bit of feel of the spirit of the time, so to speak. So there's a Swedish author and researcher in history of ideas who has written like this: the symbolist is interested in the hidden connections and by the patterns behind the impenetrable helter-skelter of the temporary. A runic writing provokes and attracts by its relative inaccessibility. It is ambiguous, contrary to all the predicted and easily interpreted texts, and it stimulates fantasy. Therefore, I think that the symbolist view of Agrell is one of the explanations for his fascination for the runic writing as a mystery. Before we go into the theory itself, I can say that a lot of his parts of his theory and his investigations, they contain a lot of numerology, where he tries to link a rune together with a mythic concept by comparing numbers and different correspondences. That is not, I guess, very interesting to listen to, so I haven't included that in this talk that much. But if you, I have of course included it in the book. So if you're interested in numbers, I guess then you can have a look. So the Elder Futhark is the runic writing we are mostly accustomed to when we hear about the runes in general. It contains 24 runes, and it has gotten its name from the first 6 runes in the rune row. It was used by the Germanic tribes during the migration period, around 300 to 600. Yeah, we have learned the names from the runes, the names of the runes from rune poems, especially from a 17th century old English rune poem. So, what is the Uthark theory then? So it is a theory developed by Agrell, where he tries to prove mainly 2 things. The first thing is that the Elder Futhark contains an encrypted or an esoteric rune row reserved for people with knowledge in its hidden meaning. And the second thing is that the number mysticism, and also a great deal of the myths connected to the rune row, was inherited or copied from the antique Mithraic mysteries. And if we regard his academic career and also his career as a poet, we can also see that he's also trying to prove a third thing, and that is that the Uthark and the rune row contains a story of a spiritual evolution or initiation, and it's basically a narrative for the for creation and the spiritual evolution of man. We can continue with the next picture. So on the top we have the Elder Futhark, and on the bottom we have the Uthark, and further to the bottom we have the Phoenician alphabet, just for comparison. You will see that they don't differ that much. One thing is very important for the encryption of the rune row, and that is that the in the Elder Futhark on the top there, all the 24 runes have a numerological value starting with 1, of course, and ending with 24. So all the runes in between have a value. And Agrell believed that the first rune should be placed last in the rune row. And then, of course, all the runes are shifted by 1. And the new starting rune is found, which is U, and it will have the number 1 then, which is very, very interesting for the Uthark theory, because the new starting rune U is the rune that is connected to the beginning of creation. And it is also connected to bovine creatures, primeval chaos, and this is the rune that I will talk about a little bit more in particular later. The F rune, which turned out to be the last rune with the value 24, is connected to wealth, and it is of course very fitting to place this rune last in the rune road, since it has the highest numerological value then. And this rune also means livestock and possession, and it symbolizes man in his final form as a civilized being. So we go from primeval chaos to man in his final form as a civilized being. Agrell also argued that the influx of ideas from Rome has influenced our belief system, and he believed that a lot of this came from the Roman Mithras cult. This was a Roman mystery cult, which was reserved for the warrior elite. It was pretty big during the 1st and to the 4th centuries. And they held their initiatory services in caverns and in caves with a 7-degree initiatory system. And he also goes into this a lot, comparing the number 7 to a lot of different things. I will not go into this today, but if you want to read about it, it's in the book. So there are 3 mythological narratives that are very important to the Mithras cult and to the relationship with the runes. And I will go through all 3 of them. The first is maybe the most famous one, maybe you've heard about it. It's the myth about the slaying of the bull. And the slaying of the primordial bull is a mythological drama that is very important for the Mithras cult and also for the Uthark theory. Let's see here, do I have a picture of this? Yes, I do. No, I don't. I have a flawless picture, but the iconography, you can see that you often see the god Mithras on the back of a bull, and he forces his fingers inside the nostrils of the bull, forcing his head backwards. And with the other hand, he cuts a fatal wound to the throat of the bull or in the back. He has a mantle, a star-clad mantle, and he is often flanked by the 2 torch-bearers, Cautes and Cautopates. One is holding an upwards pointing torch, and the other one is holding a downwards pointing torch. Symbolizing the spring and autumn equinoxes, rising and the setting sun, or the eastern and the western parts of the ecliptic. And so what we can see is, of course, that the Mithras cult was largely a stellar cult. We can also see this in the picture. There's a lot of animals surrounding the bull. We can, for example, see a dog, which is Canis minor or major, a snake, which is Hydra. There's a weak ear at the tip of the bull's tail, which is the Virgin. You can also see a raven, which is of course Corvus. And a scorpion is sometimes seen reaching for the testicles of the bull. And this is Scorpius. And Mithras himself was a symbol of the sun. Some have seen him as historically as a competitor with Christ, but in later times people have also compared him with Mercury or Odin. The bull itself can be seen as a symbol of the moon, and then we can see that the bull slaying image or iconography expresses a spiritual or a psychological relationship between the sun and the moon, or the opposites. There's a Mithraic scholar named Roger Beck, and he writes like this: "It is from the sun that the human intellect descends, and to which it will return, and it is on the moon that it's united with the soul for its incarnation on earth, and uncoupled from soul following material death." So the relationship between the sun and the moon is very important for in this iconography. The second mythological drama is about two suns, and it was believed that the Mithraists they held two different suns of worship. One was the astronomical sun, which was Helios, while the second would be the hypercosmic sun, sun existing beyond the sun. This can be compared to the Platonist concept of an inner and an outer sun, and it is a concept that is believed to have been merged into the Mithraic mysteries through the Chaldean oracles. And the Chaldean oracles was a gathering of texts used by the Neoplatonists. And this drama is, of course, interesting when looking at the sun rune, because the sun rune in the Uthark theory corresponds with the Latin letter O, which of course can be interpreted as the contours of the sun, basically a symbol for the sun. The third mythological drama that was very important for the Mithraists were the rock birth. And it was believed that Mithras was born from the rocks by the banks of a river. This is the fertile rock. It represents the womb. It represents earth, and it is also a rock that sometimes is associated in later times with the philosopher's stone. It represents cosmos, just as the Mithraic caves did, where they held their initiatory services. And it's obviously a place for significant events such as, of course, birth giving and initiatory rituals. It also represents the element earth, which is reflected sometimes in iconography, where you can see a serpent coiling around the stone. We have a lot of Mithraic temples that shows this, among them one in Slovenia. I haven't actually been yet to the temple here in London, but I don't believe that they have a snake around the stone there. Has anyone been there? Mithraic, yeah. It's in Walbrook.
Just down in the city. Yeah,
kind of, okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So the rock birth myth is, of course, interesting when we look at the rock rune, which is the 13th rune of the Uthark. And remember, this is the 13th rune. It's very important because here the numerology starts coming in. And we can find a passage from a Swedish black book called Solomonic Magical Arts, where the number 13 is connected to rock birth, or rocks, or serpents. And there is advice on how to create such a stone, and it goes like this. The operator should obtain a black ribbon made from 13 threads, which are tied around the navel of a snake. The animal is then hung in a tree, after which is said to be able to give birth to a stone big as a nut. The stone is said to enhance prophetic dreams and can, according to the manuscript, be put in good use in matters of gambling. Yes. Aside from Mithraism, Agrell also drew influence from a lot of other mythological sources. Among them Zoroastrianism and their sacred texts. He also includes a lot of Greek and Egyptian myths in his theory, and the Phoenician alphabet and their culture. And when it comes to the Nordic world, he investigates the connection between the runes and Scandinavian folk magic, Scandinavian folk tales, but also the symbols that appear on the indigenous Sami shaman drums. So what we can see is there's in this theory there are a lot of different sources that he tries to piece together in different ways, and during the investigations I've mapped out a table of correspondence based on his texts, and this is basically a table of the first 5 runes of the Uthark. You can see the correspondence between the Greek alphabet, mysticism, ancient deities, Scandinavian gods and goddesses, Sami gods and goddesses, and tarot cards, actually. Let's start with you. And yes, I mentioned the tarot cards. We have the so-called 22 trumps of the tarot, or 21 trumps and the Fool. And these 22 cards, they directly correspond with a rune, according to Agrell. But since the tarot cards are fewer in numbers, the last 3 runes of the Futhark, they all correspond to the tarot card known as the World. I will give you 2 examples of tarot cards. Yes. The Hermit and the Devil. And the reason why I'm sending this picture around is because he uses 2 very specific decks to prove his theory. The 10th rune of the Uthark has a name that means ice, and it's related to coldness, malevolent magic, and magic used for hurting or killing one's enemies. In extension, it also is a representation of death. This rune is connected to the Hermit, which is the 10th trump of the tarot, if you count the Fool. And I will give you a little quote from my book. The representation of the Hermit, which in the Uthark is corresponding with the Ice rune, is found in the Renaissance Estensi tarot, where an aged man in solitude is seen holding an hourglass instead of a lantern. This connects the Hermit with the Kronos, and in this case also Saturn, which in extension connects this card to senescence and also death. And Arthur Edward White says that this is rather a card of attainment than of quest, and that man must not spare himself even in the presence of death, but he must be certain that his sacrifice shall be of any open course the best that will ensure his end. We also have the death on this card, the devil. it is connected to the 16th rune of the Uthark, which is the rune of victory. And I will read a little bit from my book again. The victory rune is connected to the tarot card the Devil through the 17th century deck by Jacques Veville, where the devil is depicted with 4 extra faces. And as we know, 4 times 4 is 16. And this is the 16th rune. A further correspondence is found in the 16th letter Q of the classical Latin alphabet, initiating the word Quirinus, who was a Roman god of war and victory. And he was also considered to be, Quirinus was also said to be a byname for Janus, the two-faced god who overlooked the past and the future. But he was also a god of war and peace, which in this case also suggests victory. The connection between the devil then and the victory aspect of this god is seen in the several faces on the body, and as you can see in the devil, he has several faces put on his body. So the devil keeps his right hand upraised and extended, which is the reverse of that benediction which is given by the Hierophant. And the Hierophant is attributed to the 6th rune, which is a rune related to gifts. We can also see then a reversal of the sacrifice and the gift through the theft of the forbidden fruit, symbolized by the 2 humans, of course, in the card. And Arthur Edward White says that this card signifies the dweller on the threshold without the mystical garden when those are driven forth therefrom. In the Uthark theory is the Nordic or Scandinavian zodiac. The Babylonians divided the star signs into 12 different star signs around 1500 BCE, and it was later during the ancient Greek period that they were given their names that we know them by today. And in the Lay of Grimnir, in the Poetic Edda, we can read the monologues of Grimnir, which was another name for Odin, and in it he describes the 12 different strongholds or homes of the gods and goddesses of the Scandinavian pantheon. And he does it it is described in 12 verses, and one of this, all of these verses correspond to a star sign. So, the Nordic zodiac started with Sagittarius and it ended with Libra and Scorpio. And I will give you 3 examples of the correspondence between the zodiac and the strongholds of the Scandinavian gods. So Sagittarius corresponds with the stronghold of Ull. And according to Agrell, the Nordic year cycle started during winter at the same time as the sun entered Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is the bow-wielding centaur. And the first of the divine homes mentioned in the Poetic Edda is the stronghold of Ull, who, according to myth, was also an eminent bowman. He is depicted with a bow in his hand in the card, just as Sagittarius. His home is called Ydalir, which means the Valley of Yew, and the yew was the most popular tree used for bow making. Another connection is seen in Capricorn. Capricorn is connected to the second verse. Here is described a place called Alfheim, and it is the home of the fertility god Freyr. The Feast of Freyr, which was basically the same as the old Scandinavian Christmas celebration, was celebrated around this time in December. And Freyr was also considered the sun god of the Germanic tribes, and it's also possible to make a connection between Helios here. And the power of sun was reborn in December when the sun entered Capricorn. A more hands-on connection between zodiac and the stronghold is seen in Leo. Leo is the 9th star sign, and it is connected to a home called Folkvang, which is the stronghold of Freya. Freya is often described as riding a wagon drawn by 2 cats. We presumably lynxes, and she also has a close relationship with the Greek goddess Cybele, where she is depicted in a wagon drawn by 2 lions. Yes. Okay, so I will end this talk with going into a little bit more in detail and talk about the first rune. This is a rune that is very important for the Uthark theory, and it is called Ur, and it is the U rune. In the Anglo-Saxon rune poem, we can read the following. Aurochs are fierce and high-horned. A courageous beast fights with its horns. A well-known moor treader, it is a very brave creature. And this Auroch, of course, connects the first rune with Mithraic slaying of the bull myth. But it is also connected to the Scandinavian creation myth, where Audhumbla, as you can see in the card, was the primeval cow and the first creature to exist in cosmos. This was the cow that nurtured the giant Ymir with her milk, and eventually she created the first gods, among them Odin. And eventually the gods were killed and creation took place. This symbolism with the primeval cow is also found in the Zoroastrian myth, where they have a primordial bovine creature who was the first creation of Ahura Mazda, who was the highest god of the Zoroastrians. We can also see a connection with the Egyptian sky god Nut, who was one of the oldest goddesses of the Egyptian pantheon, and she's also sometimes seen depicted as a cow. Yes, and on the bottom row of the card, below the picture of the cow, you can see some letters, and of course the cow corresponds with the first letter A in our classic Latin alphabet. But the Semitic letter Aleph originally meant ox or bovine creature, and the Phoenician letter Aleph has similarities with a bull in a 90-degree rotation, I think. The same is true for the Middle Iranian alphabet, where the first letter A has similarities to bull in profile. These letters are also believed to have been developed developed from an early Egyptian hieroglyph, which actually depicts an ox's head. And of course we can see the remnant of this in our own Latin script, where we have the letter A, and if we turn the letter A upside down, we can see the head and the horns of a bull. This myth is also by Agrell seen as a representation of the Holy Sacrament. The bull was a symbol of the life force with which the rest of creation was created. And the life force and the bull, they are the same thing. And Mithras was the god or force in control of this creative power of life. Representations of the life force was later incorporated into the Mithraic mysteries as a holy communal meal, and it has been also suggested that this was later developed into the Christian Eucharist, where the flesh and blood of the bull was replaced by bread and wine. We in the indigenous Sami shaman drums, we can also see manifestations of this myth. Somehow two of my cards disappeared, but on one of the drums on the top we can see a symbol representing a reindeer bull, which is in the Sami language called ungelded reindeer, which denotes its more wilder or fertile nature, and the connection is then made to the bovine creatures of the creation. And this was also meant as a sacrifice to the three main gods of the Sami pantheon. And the first rune is also connected to the Fool of the tarot. And the Fool is sometimes seen as being outside of the totality of the deck. And just in the same way as the primeval cows were seen as being outside the creation, or they existed as part of chaos before creation. So Agrell also connects the Italian word tarocco to the vulgar Latin tauruco and the Latin word taurus. So there is also an etymological connection here between the word tarot and Taurus. And the connection between the fool, the jester, and the bull is also found in the Italian word bue, meaning both ox or bovine creature and fool. And in many languages, a person can be said to be stupid like an ox. And the French medieval jester also sometimes wore horns or dressed as cows as signs of or proof of his stupidity. And yeah, I guess stupidity has to be the final word. Thank you very much. You're welcome to ask questions now or later. I will be here for a little while. Yeah.
How long do you think the cult of Mithras survived in Sweden and also in England? What century do you think it actually died out?
I have no idea. I have only studied Mithraism as part of this, but according to the theory, at least, it lived on in the culture in a disguised way. But as a cult, I don't know. I can't answer that.
I was interested in that. When the Romans withdrew from Britain, and there was the famous advised, look to your own defences by the governors when they withdrew to Spain. I suspect it wasn't a permanent plan.
Yeah.
I think that they planned to return as and when they could, certainly within 20 or 30 years. It wasn't a permanent withdrawal. And look to your own defences might have been instructions to have a fifth column hidden. And I think that though, of course, the Roman Empire at that time was Christian, but in a lot of parts of it, the cult of Mithras indeed survived. We know that much. We don't know to what extent. But I think that there may have been a cult of Mithras operating maybe into the 8th or 9th century in North Wales, hidden. Maybe they took over some of the hidden caves the Druids had in Anglesey or something. But in those places, the language is preserved in Welsh, Northern Welsh. God, Welsh has a lot of Roman in it, Latin in it. And also in the Mabinogion, the old Welsh legends, it refers to Max Welding, Emperor of Rome, coming to place, like a return. That might have been some confusion.
Yeah,
I wondered how long it had lasted, because the basis of Mithras, of course, is very similar to Masonic initiation cults. It's too many coincidences.
Yeah, and that's why one of the things I think Agrell also mentions the connections between Freemasonry and lingering traditions in the Western esoteric world, but the Roman presence was of course not as strong in Scandinavia as in Britain, but we've had soldiers going into Rome fighting, and they brought something back with them. If they brought back the tradition of the Mithraic initiatory system, I don't know, but according to Agrell at least, and to the Uthark theory, they brought back some teachings and incorporated into the culture, which later emerged in the rune roll.
I can see that. Yes, it's very interesting.
Yeah.
Oh well, I did. I really raised my hand up. Yeah, I'm just kind of tying into that. So, is there this is the first I've heard of there being. Is there actual evidence of Mithraism in Scandinavia? Or can you speak to that?
No, not really. You mean archaeological findings, or no? This is the theory of Agrell only mentions scriptural resources or sources. No findings. He compares some of the inscriptions on artifacts and runestones with the themes I mentioned, the Mithras themes, the rock birth and the sun worship, but no like hard evidence that there has been a cult operating in Scandinavia that I know of. Thanks.
What's the name of the other?
Uthark, Sigurd Agrell, and the Swedish runes. Of course, I know the name of my book.
Just curious. So, with the correspondence between the name of the letter A, as in it was associated with an oxen, so a letter Aleph in Hebrew, and so on and so forth. But there already is an A in the rune roll, I suppose, which is not the same as a U.
Yeah, exactly.
You get what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
How did he solve that problem, so to speak? Or did he even address it?
You mean the sound value itself, or?
Yeah, I mean there already is a letter for A.
Yeah,
but it doesn't correspond with an oxen like it does in Hebrew or Phoenician.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah. How did he address that? I'm not sure. Some things you just have to accept.
Sure.
I think some of the things he is very keen on. I think discussing his findings rather than his the things he hasn't found. I mean, his theory isn't very self-reflecting, but it's an interesting thought. I don't know what he says in particular about the A rune, because obviously the A rune, let's see here, it's the third rune of the Uthark, and it corresponds with the gods, as opposed to the giants that rule creation before the gods. So the giants are number 2. The third rune is As, which means a god, basically creational god, something like that. So it still is a rune very close to the beginning of creation, but I'm not sure to answer that question.
So the Uthark rune roll is also sort of a map of cosmogenesis.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Like creation
Yeah.
itself.
Yeah.
All right.
So if we look at the first 5 runes, we have the first rune, which is U. It is of course the primeval cow in the chaos. And then we have the second rune, which is Thurs, which is the giants, the giant race. Also, we can also find it in other myths, of course. It's a more demonic rune. And then we have number 3, which is where the gods of creation take place, and they take the place of creators. They destroy the giants, and they take it from them. And then we have the 4th rune, which is related to the 4 corners of the earth. This is you can interpret it as more of a material rune, where the gods take their place in matter, where things become matter and starts to materialize. And then we have 5, which is related to fire, and it is the spark that starts the human race, the spark of initiation, or the spark of the Promethean fire, if you will. So, and it goes on like that, in more or less like that, all the way to the final rune, which is the rune of livestock in civilization. Yeah.
Which is the
F rune, yeah.
Right.
Which is it means fair in Swedish, which it means cattle, livestock, cattle. Yeah. So and the runes in between the first 5 I mentioned and the final ones, some of them are the cosmogenesis is some of them represent fertility, and some of them represents death, as I mentioned. So it's hard to see like a very definite development. But the first runes are very narratively laid out, and also the final ones. In between, it's more of an interpretation, I would say.
I think these days a lot of people are very interested in the let's say practical application of runes through kind of finding out theories for divination, also maybe magic and so on.
Yeah.
Does it go into any of that, or does it propose any theories, or can it be used for those purposes?
Yeah. Well, since he was a scholar, he never goes into he never uses sources from occultism or esotericism directly, but the connections he makes can really make use of them. And since what I said about one of the runes, they are directly connected to the tarot card. You can of course make a lot of interesting connections already there. They are also connected to the ancient deities, of course, which you can make a lot of interesting connections there. And I'm not sure. I haven't read anything aside from his theory where the runes are connected to the tarot in this way. Yeah, I guess there are a lot of scholarly and more creative connections to be made in this matter.
Like, do people actually make use of it still today? This theory concerning not just.
I'm not sure, because this theory isn't very well spread. There is a few people who have written about this theory in English before, other briefly in books, but there's not any extensive work in English where this has been described before. It's in Swedish only, and a little bit in German. So that's why I've written this book, because I would like to shed some light on this theory, and maybe people can interpret it and make use of it in some way.
Right. Thank you very much, Fredrik.
Thank you. Thank you.